Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Not D&D. I am your host Jessica from E&World, World, and this week joining us we have Helena Reel. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Hi, hello everybody.
Hi. So this week we're going to be talking about her game Against the Odds, and we are recording live. So if you have any questions, please get involved and put them in the chat. We will try and answer your questions. And if you're listening to the podcast or watching later, not live, all the links for everything we're talking about will be in the chat or in the show notes. So before we dig into the game and talk about that, I first like to talk about you as the guest. So my first question is as always, if you remember the first tabletop RPG that you ever played, what started this whole journey?
Exactly. 23 plus years ago, I think. I'm a Chilean. I live in Chile, so we always got stuff here very delayed. Now it's less so, but at the time, I started playing Middle Earth role playing game, like that
Oh
old
wow!
RPG for the 90s. And we didn't even had the movies yet. So
Okay.
all of our knowledge was based upon, in my case, The Hobbit, and then I read The Lord of the Rings. So, but it was really fun, and it was very complicated, like a lot of charts and tables. It was really fun, and then we moved on to AD&D Second Edition, which for the longest of time was the RPG that we just played, and I cut my teeth in like early design in that game because there were like rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide about how to create classes. So I will create classes for my friends, trying to combine my love of Warhammer Fantasy with like some of that. So it was a crazy thing back in the day. But yeah, that's how I started. And then we discovered Call of Cthulhu, which became such an incredible part of my childhood, adolescence, like learning about those stories, like that whole thing about cosmic horror. And then I even got into Vampire the Masquerade when I was like in, I don't know, senior year in high school or something like that. So I did the whole 90s in like 2 or 3 years or something like that. Yeah.
So how did you move to being somebody that just played a lot of games and enjoyed them to somebody that works, kind of creates games and works professionally? Because you're a professional game master as well, is that right?
Yeah.
Amazing. How did you go for that? Yeah.
It's the crazy thing. Back in 2015, I was working as a copywriter for a company, and I was really bored and a little bit conflicted about the whole thing of like using my skills as a writer to just like to sell stuff.
Sure. Okay.
And I was looking online, and I remember the time I was like really, I'm still am a huge fan of Fate. So there was this little magazine, Patreon funded, called The Fate Codex by Mark Diaz Truman. And I loved it, and I was subscribed to it, and I was reading it. And then one day I was like, I'm gonna check out the website, and the website had like submission guidelines. And I was like, oh, I wrote this little game for like a competition, like one of those write an RPG in a week competitions. But I would love to. I really always thought of it like as a Fate setting. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna send like a a little pitch about what it is. And I was like, I imagine I'm gonna send this. Mark's gonna look at it, or somebody's gonna look at it, and 2 months later they're gonna say, "Thank you, we're not interested," which was my experience at the time. To my surprise, back when I got home, like that evening, I had an email from Mark, which was like, "Oh, I love it. I want 5,000 words on it. We're gonna pay you this much. Do you feel you can have it like in a month or something?" And I was like, "Okay, I think this is it." And then it was the craziest thing because Mark went on to join John Wick Presents, and then it was like this whole thing about the Kickstarter for 7th Second Edition. And there was a little bit like I was a backer, and then there was they were looking for like new writers for some of the new books, and they were explicitly looking for people from Latin America. So I applied to that, and then I saw that Mark was there. I was like, if you can put in a good word, for me, that was like a couple of years later. I'd be more than happy, and he did, and yeah, I got work, a lot of work with 7th, and then the whole circle, like I think September that year, that was 2016. The people from Evil Hat contacted me and said, like, we really love what you're doing. We want you to write a Fate world. That was the time when they had this Patreon funded as well, collection of settings and everything. And I wrote that, and that setting, which is the Way of the Pacona, went on to win one award. So yeah, that's been a little bit of the journey. After that, I've been networking as everybody else does, like freelancing, trying to ask for people, and then 3 years ago, so that was 2021. I was having a conversation with a friend, and then they said, would you like to participate in a private playtest, but you have to sign an NDA and everything. I was like, sure. And that NDA was for Avatar Legends, like before
Oh,
anybody
wow.
else knew. Yeah, it was like private playtest
Amazing.
with the people at
Yeah.
Magpie, and then they invited me to start running for them, and I've been in that creative program, like the curated play program, for the past 3 years, running hundreds of sessions of RPGs. I run 3-4 times a week, and it's been
Amazing.
a lot of fun. Yeah.
It's a lot of people's dream jobs. I bet a lot of people are listening being really jealous right now. What?
Exactly. Yeah. You get to do it for a living, and yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I do, and it's really fun, and also it's like it's different from running, like, because I also run like my regular sessions for friends,
Mm-hmm.
but it's very different because I always
Oh, yeah.
see it as a service. I try to
Mm-hmm.
provide and be, like my best version possible,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that I think I've had a lot of success. I've never had any complaints or anything like that in 3 years,
That's
so I'm
good.
very happy about it. Yeah.
Well, I guess it is different when you're playing for other people, because I think when you're playing with your friends, you're also, even though as a GM for me running the game, I'm also a player looking to have fun. But I guess, like you say, when it's a professional game, you're looking to provide a service more than, is this fun for me? It's more, is it fun for them? So would that be about
Yeah.
right? Or of course it's still fun because you're playing a game, hey, but
Exactly, yeah. But there
yeah.
is that thing of like trying to prioritize. In this case, the player's fun, and I'm always
Mm-hmm.
asking, what they want to see, or being very. I'm always like that when I'm running RPGs, even for my friends. But I'm explicitly more like, if you want to change anything about your character, or if you want to, do something different, just let me
Mm-hmm.
know. I'm very open to ideas, and as a result of that, I've had a couple of very interesting things in which players have contacted me out of game and said, I want to use this ability, but I don't want to be disruptive. Do you think we can set up something about it? And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, sure. So those type of things I think are very interesting, and I'm really
Yeah.
happy about the experience, and I hope to keep on doing it for as long as I
Sure.
can.
Do you have any advice for anyone that's looking to get into doing that? Because I know some people have contacted me before, but I don't actually run games professionally. So I was like, oh, I'm not the
Yeah.
person to ask, but you would be. So do you have any
Yeah.
advice for people that are starting out, that are looking to run games professionally, be a professional GM?
I would say that the most important thing is seeing it as the way I see it, I think, as a service. Seeing it as something that you're doing, like you are trying to get these people happy. And I think in the current market, like outside of the creative play program that I'm a part of, for example, in places that have like websites for this,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I see a lot of DnD, of course. Like DnD is like
of course.
everywhere, everybody's running it, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it's rather difficult unless you have already like spent a lot of money on, I don't know, any of the VTTs or anything like that, to really differentiate yourself. So I would recommend going for weirder games, different games,
Mm-hmm.
maybe offer games that are not as popular, but people are still interested. And the other thing is that I'm always very keen on using safety tools. So in this case, I
Yeah.
would say you would need to interview your players, like get an idea of who they are. If you want to run an inclusive game, which of course I support, that you run an inclusive and open game,
Mm-hmm.
you need to make sure then that you don't get any people who are not inclusive
Mm-hmm.
in that case. So yeah, and safety tools always is the first step that the first thing I tell new players that I'm playing with, like, please fill this form so
Yeah.
we can have be on the same page regarding like what are things that you don't like to see in the game, and if you don't like to see them, I don't want to bring them up.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. For much longer, but we are here to talk about against the odds instead.
yeah,
So let's get into this. So it's the short pitch for it.
yeah. The short pitch is that it's a fantasy game, heroic fantasy game that is pretty much inspired by, of course, D&D as well. I've been playing D&D for 23 years,
Mm-hmm.
so through many editions. So of course, it's a huge influence as well. And the idea is to focus on the narrative, on the drama of the story. Like, the game doesn't have like equipment or wealth or HP, or anything like that, armor, no different weapons or anything. It just focuses on this idea that you're a hero. You're supposed to have everything you need to be doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the in the rules as written. The idea is that in you doing your heroics, some of the situations that in games like D&D or other fantasy role-playing games would be like the good thing to do, like corruption. And the corruption track, you have no way to clear it in the rules as written. So basically, if you keep on doing this, at some point you're going to turn into a villain. It's much easier to become corrupted than to reach like the highest level, quote unquote, like to acquire all of the advancements, to be the most powerful version of yourself. So there's like a balance as well, and I think that's a little bit of what it is about. It's a heroic fantasy game for people who want to get straight to the drama, straight to the storytelling, and the fiction, and have them in that situation.
Fantastic. Well, I guess all your experience of running different types of games, like you say, it's fantasy, and I think when you say a fantasy RPG, people always say, "Why don't we just play D&D then?" I wouldn't say that because I host a not D&D podcast, but I'm sure this system. What does this provide that playing Dungeons and Dragons would in a fantasy setting?
Against the odds game, theoretically, have happened in the playtest, could happen in a D&D session. The thing is that D&D has no tools that can help you get there, whereas this game is only focused in giving you those tools. The things that are in the game are the tools that are gonna let you get to places like having inter-party conflict or having situations in which you have to make very difficult no-win scenario decisions. And it rewards you for doing that. It gets you to that point in which you get benefits for doing so in-game mechanics. And the idea is that since all of the tools are focused on that, the engine is an engine of ROM. The way I see it is that all of the sessions that I've run of this, which I've been like, if I describe them to you as like the high-level pitch of the adventures that I've written and everything like that, they sound like D&D. But the thing is that the problem, the differentiator is that at the table, it feels very different. Like, for example, the other day, I was running an adventure in which the players are trying to stop basically a horde of zombies, like sieging a town.
Okay.
And they reach the town, and the whole setup is that you have a friend that lives in town who retired from being an adventurer, like a hero. And you reach her and you talk to her, and she's like changed. She's different. And you have all of these questions that you answer in the setup. Let's say, she was my friend, or I really mistrusted her even when we were, part of the same group.
Yeah.
And then you start realizing that she's the problem. She's the reason why these zombies are here. It's because she's a vampire. So they turn on in the classic, of course, it has happened twice already. Like, the players are like, okay, we have to confront her. We have to have this awful conversation. Like, are you a vampire? Are you a monster now? And then, the fight and everything else we didn't have that sort of joy of killing this. It was like old sad violence on the back, in a way. So that's what I'm looking for. The way I see it, like when I play RPGs, I really want to, in that sense, I want those moments of conflict, of character growth, of having written in such a way that they are supposed to be not so much about what you do, but who you are, your best self. So I think that's the difference, is that probably everything could happen in a D&D game, but D&D is not going to have any tools whatsoever. If it happens, it's because you and your players are awesome. Rules hopefully didn't stand in your way. But it wasn't like D&D's.
You are listening or watching and you want to check it out, there is a link on it. When I was reading through it seemed it was a very kind of character focused sort of game. So it's about the people in the game. It's a So the game is made. You kind of uses Powered by the Apocalypse source game, and what your take on it is.
Yeah. So the first thing that is weird, and I know it's in the game, like I'm always going to set up. Basically, you and the GM talk about, if you're not running an adventure or something like that, you talk about what kind of adventure you want to play with. So you talk about an objective for the whole group, some themes that I offer, like some options, and even and we probably can have these or those connections to them. And after you complete that, you do like an inciting incident, like a little bit of a prologue to the adventure proper, so you want it before and what's going to happen after that. And then, character creation, as you said, is powered by the apocalypse. So the idea is that it's very simplified, straight to the bone of the story. So you have only 4 stats, which are like body, heart, mind, and spirit. So body is like what you would expect, everything that has mind is your rational part, and spirit is like the ineffable, the weird, anything that you cannot really talk about. And then you choose an ancestry and a background. You have a list, or you can create your own. And these become relevant because there's a move in the game that is called rely on your experience for training, which basically has a lot to do with whether you, as your ancestry or your background or your calling, would know that or not. If you don't, you can then trust Lady Luck, which is a different move, which has a little bit of a cost always, but you can still try it anyway, even if you don't have any of the tools. And from that, the idea is that you have what is called a feature, which in this case, and the one that you're showing, which is the bard, is the one in the middle, the performing artist. And you get that for free. And all of the playbooks have a resource, a heroic resource. In this case, the bard has inspiration. So you choose a number of fields of performing arts in which you are specialized. And whenever you do a performance, you get some inspiration, and you can use that to help your friends. And some other little, like extra things on there. And then you choose one of each playbook has 5 moves, five calling moves, and you choose one of those. And after that, you write your character's backstory. There's 5 questions for each character, specific to each calling. And the 5th one is the same for everybody, which is, why did you join this company? Or adventure, why are you here? And that gives you an idea of who your character is. And then you do introductions, so everybody talks about the characters, and then you do bonds, which basically are connections that you have to other characters at the table, and they give you a mechanical benefit. So it's not only like in this case, like fluff, as we call it sometimes. It gives you like a tangible benefit that you really want to get. So that creates relationships right from the start. So the group has all of these relationships, and that's about it. And that's character creation, I think. Once again, people who know PBTA, who have played games like Avatar Legends or Masks or any of those, I think you can probably create a character in like 20 minutes, half an hour. And the character that you you come up with out of character creation, I think you're gonna know a lot more about your character, I hope, than if you just were like rolling dice and just getting stuff. It's just it's more focused on getting to know your character and getting to hone in on why you're special or different or anything like that.
Absolutely. I love your approach to that, like you're saying about story first. Let's say what we're doing, and then make your character to fit that scenario, because there's nothing worse than someone going away making a character and then it just doesn't fit that campaign, and they don't have a really natural reason to be there. Because that makes it hard for the player and really hard for the person running the game as well to kind of hook them in. So
it really does. And you have this thing of like, there's that I've always hated this idea, especially like as a later in life, I've hated this idea that the GM has to come up with everything. You have to come to the table, have the rules, have the books, have the ideas, the adventure, and everything, and the players have little or no say whatsoever in what we're going to play. Like, and I think that's very strange, because like we are all players at the table. So in that sense, I think it's much better if we all agree on what we want to do. And people sometimes say, "Oh, but I don't know, I'm not very creative, or I'm not very good at this thing." And then they come up with like the craziest, coolest ideas that you can incorporate. So I think that's so much better.
Absolutely. So one thing I want to talk about the mechanics in the game is about the corruption track, because you mentioned how narratively how corruption works, and obviously that encourages people to not just go and be murder hobos and the solution is to kill everything. Like, so clearly
Exactly.
it's encouraging you mechanically to not do that. But how does the corruption track work? So when we're playing the game.
Yeah. So the idea is that some moves and some there are some advice for the GM, some acts that you can commit give you corruption.
Mm-hmm.
It's a track that has 4 slots. And whenever you reach the 4th slot, you clear the track and you choose one advancement, like one corruption move.
Okay.
There's 4 of them, and 3 out of those 4 are gonna give you more power. Like they give
Okay.
you things you really want to do. You're gonna be better at
Mm-hmm.
fighting or better at doing magic or anything like that. It's gonna be less costly. But each of those 3 corruption moves internally have their own like little mechanic that's gonna
Mm-hmm.
give you more corruption.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is that in using them, you're gonna acquire more and more corruption. And the
Yeah.
4th move says basically for all of the playbooks, like you're not gonna be a hero anymore. You have to retire your character right now, and you may return as a villain. So that's when you lose your character, and
I
that's the idea of how it
I
works.
like I like the idea of that though, because I've played some games not using this system, but that haven't had that
No,
sort of mechanic, and I've seen them. I'm like, oh, this person's definitely going to end up being a villain because they're so hell bent on what they're doing for the right reason. They
exactly.
feel for the right reasons, but then
Yeah,
that's how you become a villain. I think is you don't wake up and go, how can I be the worst? But well, maybe you do, but
exactly.
not everybody wakes up and says, how can I be the worst person today? It's a slope you take because you're like, oh, but I know this isn't great, but I need to do this for this, and it'll be
Yeah,
worth it, and I can justify it. And I really liked how the game made it realistic as to why you became a villain, and you see how you slowly become that thing because you slowly want to take this temptation, have this power to do maybe something really noble. Maybe you're trying to save the
yeah,
town and I need to take this power so I have the strength to defeat this. So it
exactly.
seemed really nice narratively to have that kind of corruption track in there, and I like
Yeah.
the idea of losing a character to something like that. So that
It's
seems
so
very fun to
dramatic,
me.
and that's the thing.
Yes.
Like for me, I'm the type of player that when I'm playing, I don't want to play a character for 5 years and then
Mm.
retire them to happiness. But it may happen every once in a while. I want
Yeah.
them to go out in with a bang. So the game offers a couple of those.
I was about to say, speaking of which,
Yeah,
heroic sacrifice that leans in very nicely to the going out with a bang.
exactly. So
Yeah, yeah.
heroic sacrifice is an idea that there's a specific move that you can unlock with advancements.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of hard to get to. You need to get other 5 basic advancements before you
Mm-hmm.
can get is an advanced experience reward.
Okay.
And once you get it, you basically have a button on your character that says at any point during the game you can intervene and say, I'm gonna trigger my heroic sacrifice, and it does gives you like a description of what can you do regard depending on your calling,
Mm-hmm.
and you do it, and then it's usually an amazing ridiculous thing like you defeat a villain or overcome the odds in a very difficult situation or something like that, or change someone's heart and provide them
Mm-hmm.
with a redemption or something. And then once you do that, your character dies and it cannot be brought back to life by any means. So basically that's the end. That's the scene in the movie, or that's the scene in the
Yeah.
book where the character dies. And I was reading the other day Dragonlance, which is Dragonlance is my favorite
Yes. Mm-hmm.
series book. And
Mm-hmm.
Storm is one of my favorite characters. And the way he dies, spoilers for a book that's like 30 or
Spoiler
40
alert.
years old, yeah.
Yeah.
Um when he dies, there's this moment like before he dies that he has this kind of a peace within himself. That he has been depressed and having like the worst time of his life, and then he becomes like clear and he's like, I fulfilled my purpose. Don't feel sad
Mm-hmm.
about me. Like I'm gonna do something great with my life now in sacrificing it. And I hadn't thought about it for years. And then the other day I was thinking, yeah, heroic sacrifice is that. It's giving you the chance to write your own ending. One of the things that I
Yeah.
think is very I consider it not a good thing in RPGs is that we now get this sort of like, I love that people get attached to their characters more
Yeah.
and they love them, and and they draw them or pay people to draw them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but the problem is that stories need an ending. I
Yeah.
think stories without an end are not as powerful or as good as the stories with an ending.
Yeah, I agree.
And heroic sacrifice is another ending that you can choose. You can
Yeah.
become corrupted, yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's more or less within your grasp to decide
Mm-hmm.
whether it happens or not. Heroic sacrifice is just, I'm saying, here you have it, you bought it, you got it, you fought for this, you get this heroic sacrifice, you're gonna change the world with this,
Mm-hmm.
and change a lot of people's
Yeah.
worlds, because of what you did. But it's gonna cost you your life. And isn't it such a
Yeah.
great thing that you think about it? Oh, I lost my character, but I did this amazing thing, and nobody's
Yeah.
ever gonna forget that. So yeah, that's the idea with
Absolutely.
heroic sacrifice. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had that in 2 games where one of the characters I played for 2 years, and I love her. I still love her, but
Yeah.
she died at the end by sacrificing herself. But it was just the right thing, and it was the thing the character would do. It was the right thing for the world.
Exactly.
It was the right thing for the story in the moment. And I think that's, like you say, good stories need to have an end. And I still love that character. I still have the character playlist I play sometimes, and
Yeah.
she's still
Exactly.
alive in my mind. But like you say, in storybooks and films that you read, the characters that sacrifice themselves heroically and have those interesting arcs and endings are the stories that kind
Yeah.
of stay with us. And I think that's great that you've kind of let people have that moment in the game. So talking about the game as well, I want to talk about magic in the game as well.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we talk about that. So could you talk about your approach to magic? Because fantasy worlds have so many different options for what you can do
Oh
and
yeah.
what you can be. So how have you approached it?
Well, I try to approach it in a different way instead of like, because I love Dungeon World. I love, many people tell me,
Mm-hmm.
why do I have to play your game if I have Dungeon World, which has everything that I love from D&D, but it's like so much stuff. This game is very
Mm-hmm.
lean. It's very like simplified and
Mm-hmm.
everything. And the other thing is that I don't really like the way D&D does magic, to be honest. Like this idea of, oh, I'm gonna spend a resource that I can get back, and I'm just gonna change reality. I find it kind of boring. Whereas
Okay.
in books and movies and everything
Mm-hmm.
else, magic is so dangerous. Whenever you
Yeah.
do it, it's gonna exact a cost on you. So out of the 12 callings that are in the quick start and the full rules, if at some point I get to publish this like professionally, um out of those 12, for example, the druid doesn't have really magic
Mm-hmm.
per se, like, but they have a move that they can choose which allows them to call on the spirits of nature to do things for them.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's the idea, that you can narratively say that everything that a druid would do can basically, I think, fit in that move. And so far, people have agreed with me regarding that. Those who play the game. And then we have the three. Well, we have the mystic, which is clerics. I think are ahistorical and they don't really work in my opinion as well. Like this idea of like
Okay.
having monotheistic like priests,
Mm-hmm.
which also like are good fighters or something. It's very
Mm-hmm.
strange. And mystics is this idea of like someone that is connected to something that they say is a good thing, like a good
Mm-hmm.
otherworldly being, and then get some powers. And once again, in this case, the playbook mechanic for them is they pray. Basically, they ask their numen is the name that I use for these otherworldly beings. They ask their numen for a miracle, and sometimes they get it. And they also, when they do good things for their faith, they collect faith, which they can use to do like minor miracles, which are still are good things like healing other people, helping them, and all of that. And those are like the two that don't have magic, but really have magic in a way,
Yeah. Yeah.
they
Yeah.
can access magic. And then we
Mm-hmm.
have the big three, which are for me the three that are specifically dedicated to magic, which are the sorcerer, the witch, and the mage.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the sorcerer is very interesting, I think, because the idea is that you have a number of ways of doing magic, like altering, commanding, or summoning, kind of like verbs
Mm-hmm.
combined with spheres, which are nouns. So like elements or nature or just life, death, and stuff like that. And they combine those in an effect. And the idea of the sorcerer is that instead of having a resource, they carry overload. They start accumulating overload. And at some point, if they have too much overload, they kind of explode in a way. The magic goes out of control, hurts people, can hurt themselves, and they need to be very calm when they're doing stuff. So if they get
Mm-hmm.
conditions, which are like emotional states that are very important in the game, sorcerers cannot do magic if they have them. But also they have ways of getting rid of those as well.
Okay.
And then we have the mage, which is your classic wizard type, which in this case, the idea is that they use ether, which is like the resource, like they can channel ether and use it for magic, and they write spells. And the idea is that the game includes there's 5 rank of spells, like from 1 to 5. And the idea is that you start with a number of them, depending on your specialization, which you
Sure.
choose.
Mm-hmm.
And then you write your own spells. So basically, you can discover them or write them as you are leveling up, or just
Oh, cool.
more and more experience. It's a classic thing. The thing that I like about it is that you can write your own spells, so you can change and do things like to accommodate your character, which I think is very interesting. And also, there are a number of example spells, so GMs and players have guidance a little bit about the power level depending on. And finally, we have the witch. So the witch has a pact with an otherworldly being.
Okay.
Interesting to do, and what they do accumulate is debt. So when they do
Right.
witch powers, they get dead. And the thing is that if their debt goes out of control, they roll like a doom move. And in that move, if they roll high enough, they start accumulating doom. And if that doom track reaches 13, their master basically appears in reality. So in you doing your witchy power, trying to do good, you may, inadvertently invoke that horrible being or creature from another dimension and bring it into the mortal realm. So yeah, that's those are the big three, and they have very different ideas about what magic is and how it works. So magic as a concept is present in the idea that everybody can grab some moves from other playbooks that have a little bit of magic in them, but each playbook that does magic specifically, like the sorcerer, the witch, and the mage, those three have like very different ways of approaching it. And I hope that has been my experience. People really like it because people who want to play a witch don't really care much about preparing spells or knowing spells. They just they want to fulfill that fantasy of having this power, which also comes from this kind of tainted source and interesting. Yeah.
Nice. I love that. Absolutely. So I love how, the approach to magic is very different. So you can have campaigns where you have a variety of different things, or you could have one where it's like, oh, we're all going to play this and we're going to use this magic source. So it seems really open for people to kind of create the world and the lore that they're kind of interested in, which is really nice.
Yeah.
One thing you mentioned briefly before, but I want to talk about a bit more, is you chose to remove any HP from like the game. There was none of that. So if someone's coming from like something more classic fantasy like D&D, they might be surprised that how do you try. So what was my question? My question is, why did you decide to do that, and what does that change in the game? There we go. There's the question.
My favorite fantasy movie, which I don't think even if it qualifies, is The Princess Bride.
Okay, no, that counts. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And the final struggle between the Count, and Inigo Montoya is there's a lot of cuts. And cuts, I mean, like they're hurting each other. But in reality, it's all about their emotions. Like Inigo is stabbed on the chest, I think, or on the stomach, and he's about to die, but he comes back to life for a moment because he remembers why he's doing this and all that. And I love that emotional part. And I started then thinking about all of my favorite fantasy stories in any format, and there was always this trend of very few incidental harm. There's little bruises, cuts, anything like that is really not relevant. And then we have like a big hit, something that can kill you or something like that. And the emotions always, like afraid or being, involved in this, hopeless, and all those. So the idea is that in the game, HP has been turned as a harm mechanic into fatigue, which is a five slot track that basically allows you to fuel some of your abilities and to help other people as well. And conditions, which there's 4 of them. And the idea is that you mark most of the time fatigue or conditions. Fatigue you recover in the usual way, like resting, having some time off, a good meal, or something like that. Whereas conditions stay with you. And you have 2 ways of getting rid of them. One is doing something, breaking something important, or hurting someone you don't want to hurt. Or you can receive guide or comfort, which basically comfort or support, which basically allows other player to roll with heart, and they can offer some encouraging words or give you a hug. I don't know, and that allows you to clear conditions and fatigue as well. So in this case, the power of friendship is what powers these heroes in that
Love
sense.
That.
And in that's how it's. And once again, I think HP for me, at least at this point in my life, is undramatic. I don't think there's anything dramatic about it, except like the last.
Yes.
Like if I have 50 or 1,000, I don't care. But the last, I thought it's much better to have like a flatten math in this case, like when it comes to how much stuff to track, and then making it count, making it, you feel tired, you're getting fatigued in the fiction, and then the conditions are really when you are getting afraid of what's happening. Maybe you're not about to die, but you feel like you're about to. And I think that emotional reading of harm is for me much more interesting than any tracking of like numbers in that sense.
Absolutely. It feels like in this game, every time you change the mechanic, it's come down to, I want this to be more dramatic. Yeah. And I really like that about it.
That's the underlying principle for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. A game like D&D, what is the kind of complexity like in this game? Like, what would you kind of compare it to? So is it something for somebody that's played a lot of games? Is it suitable for someone new to the hobby? Like, what sort of level is it?
I think I hope, and I think it's good enough that someone that is really new can learn it, because once again, it's only 2d6s plus a number, and you always want to roll high, and even sometimes with a cherry on top. 7 to 9, you're gonna get not what you wanted exactly. Maybe you get something different. You're gonna have to pay a cost or something. And 6 is a miss, which isn't always a failure. Sometimes you're gonna get what you wanted, but it's gonna be like a huge cost. I would say, okay, you open the door, but there's like 10 guards waiting for you on the other side. You open the door, but there's something the fiction grew worse for you at that moment. So the idea is that I think it's simple enough. In my experience, people who don't have any idea whatsoever of what an RPG is get very quickly get acquainted with how it happens, and it follows from the fiction. That's the other thing. A lot of we tend to, because we love RPGs, we need to try to. I used to try to explain them like from the rules, like this is rule for this is rule for that. Now it's like you are playing this character. Imagine the character in your head. Imagine what I'm trying to tell you that is happening in the story if I'm running. What would your character do? What do you think they would? Would they hit somebody? Would they talk to them? And then we can find a move that fits or something. And once again, in a little time, I think a session or even less, so people immediately get the gist of it and can start using the mechanics like in our favor, because also it's very transparent as well. Like there's no system mastery here really. You really want your resource, you want to use it to do strategic things, but in a once again emotional connect with your friends type of thing. Like for example, the idea of the bonds getting you a mechanical benefit is because I want the characters in the group to like each other, to trust each other to a certain extent. And this is a way of saying, hey, if you do this, you're gonna get something that you really like. So positive reinforcement and stuff like that.
Perfect. Well, we're coming up nearer to the end of the time. So is there anything we haven't talked about the game, or any kind of closing words you kind of want to leave us with?
Just that I'm really happy. This took me 2.5 years of work, which sounds like a lot, but in reality, I'm a single designer working on this on her spare time. So that's why it took so long. And I'm really happy with the result. I really hope that a lot of people can see it. The game is pay what you want, so you can just get it for free if you want to give it a read. Today I released 1.2, which is a new update that includes some changes and the play and some printer friendly play materials as well, so you can use those if you want to play in person. And the idea is that I don't know, give it a try. There's some surveys there if you play the game, or if you read it, or if you are a GM that run it, hopefully, and you can leave them some feedback. And I read all of those, and I'm really interested in making this game like the best version it can be. I'm really happy because this is the game that I wanted to play really back in 2001 or 2, and now I get to have it. And I had to write it. I would have loved to just buy it from someone else,
but it wasn't.
To write it.
Yeah.
And then, this is the game for me. I just want to have fun with my friends, have a lot of drama, get some tears or something in there, very emotional stuff, and we are now can do it. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, I love all the drama that's been inserted into the game. So I think that's fabulous. So thank you so much for making it. So I do have one more question for you that I ask everyone before they go, and it's if you have any recommendations for any other tabletop role playing games that isn't a game that you've made, and is of course not D&D.
Exactly. I want to recommend a weird one here. I want to get the audience.
Yeah.
Nobilis.
Okay.
Now, especially Nobilis Second Edition. It's a diceless role-playing game about being basically a demigod in charge of a part of reality.
Okay.
And you are supposed to be taking care of a part of this part of reality, but there's one rule: you cannot fall in love, and that's the one thing that you really want to do in the game.
Okay.
It's an amazing game from the early 2000s. It's been for me the most influential RPG I've ever read or played or run. Because it's diceless first, was the first time I played a game that you really needed. There was like no chance, no randomness. It was always, what you wanted out of it. Very dramatic, super fun, and I really recommend it. And another one that I would say, once again, it's an old one, but I love it, is Stormbringer, which is an old RPG based upon the stories of Elric of Melniboné, which is one of my favorite characters in fantasy. I recommend those books as well if you haven't read them. I think there's a new edition nowadays that it's like 3 volumes that has all of the stories. Dark fantasy, very different, psychedelic stuff. Very good. And the RPG uses the basic role playing game system, but it has a lot of nuances that I really love. Like you track law, balance, and chaos. So you can become a champion of either of those forces depending on what acts you do in the story, and you can have percentages over 100. This is a percentage game, so you can have, I can have like a skill on the sort of 250% or something crazy like that. So it's a really cool game, and if you want to play fantasy that feels different, very lethal, very, in that case, dark fantasy stuff, I think I'd really recommend it too. So those two, I really recommend in case you want them to give them a try.
Those are some great recommendations. Thank you. I love that you went in straight with a really weird one. That's always my favorite. Some people bring out things like this. Thank you so much. Helena, thank you so much for coming on. It's been so lovely speaking to you about Against the Odds, and I hope everyone watching goes and checks out and has a look, maybe has a play, provide some feedback, and the best way to support indie tabletop RPG creators is to buy their stuff. So it's pay what you want. So maybe chuck a few dollars as well. That'd be great.
Exactly.
But I think that's all for this week. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for everyone that watched and listened. We'll be back next week. Next week we'll be giving you promo for everything we're talking about in August. So you can check that out. You can either read that on EN World or listen to the podcast or watch the live stream, and we'll go over all the games we're talking about in August. But for this week, I think that's all.
Yeah. Thank you so
very
much.
much.
Bye.